Hello everybody, this is Professor Hill. This is a short video for our class, Introduction to Ethics, Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College. So today's Thursday, the 22nd of March 2018. We've been talking about IHL, International Humanitarian Law, and specifically looking at an educational program put out by the International Committee of the Red Cross called Exploring Humanitarian Law, IHL. We looked at their first module, which is about humanitarian values, specifically about bystander effect, and also about just the humanitarian values that underscore and provide a foundation for all of international humanitarian law. Well, yesterday we were talking about the moral aspects of this. This is an ethics class. We're interested in ethics, and specifically about morality. If ethics is the philosophical study of morality, and morality is our beliefs about good and bad, right and wrong, we want to take a look at some of the more complex issues out there, like international humanitarian law and all that it applies to in terms of armed conflict. It's a big field, but it does help us sort out the legal from the ethical. And in our particular case study, we were talking about an assassination in South Africa and a woman who made the decision to pick up the phone and call the police. Her testimony turned out to be critical to the conviction of the assailants and solving the crime, bringing justice to his murder. Now, I mentioned briefly yesterday that when we talk about murder and witnesses to murder, that they have a lot of conflicting influences on them, and it might just be the starting place for a lot of people that say, look, I don't want to get involved, it might be dangerous, if I'm not under any legal obligation or moral obligation to do this, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, keep my head down and go forward. I don't want all the trouble that that's going to bring. In fact, there's a famous case from March 1964, and I want to read you a brief clip from the New York Times, which reported on this murder. Here's the story, which is, for more than half an hour, 38 respectable, law-abiding citizens in Queens watched a killer stalk and stab a woman in 3 separate attacks. Twice the sound of their voices and the sudden glow of their bedroom lights interrupted him and frightened him off. But each time he returned, sought her out and stabbed her again. Not one person telephoned the police during the assault. One witness did call after the woman was dead. That was 2 weeks ago today, but Assistant Chief Inspector Frederick Lucen, in charge of the borough detectives and a veteran of 25 years of homicide investigations, is still shocked. He can give a matter-of-fact recitation of many murders, but this baffles him not because it's a murder, but because the quote-unquote good people failed to call the police. It says, quote, as we have reconstructed the crime, the assailant had 3 chances to kill this woman during a 35-minute period. He returned twice to complete the job. If we'd been called when she was first attacked, the woman might not now be dead. Well, that was a terrible story. The woman, who was 28 years old, her name was Genovese. She was killed in this stabbing attack. And it presented a kind of a difficult moment for the city, because all these people who were later interviewed by the police said, well, yes, they had seen it, and no, they decided not to call. They didn't want to get involved. They were scared. They thought someone else would do it. In fact, a lot of psychologists have studied this incident since it happened, back again, like I said, in 1964. And they studied it to try to learn about the social dynamic that causes people to freeze up and not want to get involved. And they've done a lot of work, but it's a complicated mixture of factors that come into play here. And I think individually, if we look at even our case study, you might think to yourself, well, look, here's this one guy getting murdered, this one witness. She calls it in. That's good of her, but she didn't necessarily have to, and I would have let her off the hook legally and ethically if she had not called. But you know, the thing about the Kitty Genovese case in New York City was that it wasn't just one person or two or 5 or 10. But you got to think to yourself, isn't it the same for each of the 37 different people who did not call? Gosh almighty, that's when you think to yourself, you see, but that was actually, even the large number was part of the problem. Because people, I think, kind of logically assume, well, somebody else will call. I don't have to do it. Somebody else will do it. There's lots of people. But none of them did. And she ended up dying because of it. So I want you to think about that incident as well as the one I was telling you about yesterday. I wanted to follow up. I had mentioned to you that I have indeed, myself, been the witness to a murder. There we go. And, yeah, and it turns out that in that particular situation, although many of the factors we've been talking about, which would, you know, disincline me from calling the police, I was with my wife at the time when we saw this murder. We kind of looked at each other and said, almost immediately, all right, let's call the police. And we did. Now, what's interesting is, in hindsight, it turned out to be a train wreck. The investigation was handled badly. We had to leave the city because people became aware that we had identified them based upon the physical evidence at the scene, the fact that they were captured right away based on us giving them a phone. It was just like the particular case we were talking about in our case study. Gave them a license plate. They stopped the people only a few blocks away and were able to return them to the scene of the crime where we ID'd them in the street. But now other people knew that we were the witnesses. That created a much higher risk than normal. And the police encouraged us to immediately move out of the neighborhood. We moved out of the state. And I remember one of the police officers, we were talking to him about, we were trying to assess the risk, and one of the things he said was, well, look, these guys are part of a gang. They know that you did this now. And if you think that, are they dangerous? Well, yeah, they just shot 3 people to death in broad daylight. I was like, oh my, okay. So we did leave, and immediately, and it had a huge impact on our lives. For the record, the people that, since they had all the evidence on them, these guys ended up in a plea bargain, pleading guilty, and going to jail. Like I said, they kind of had them dead to rights. That turned out for us, once we made the decision, we knew that there might be repercussions, but we didn't know how severe they turned out to be in the end. But it was significant. In hindsight, am I still glad that we did it? I think the answer is yes. It's easier now. This was a long time ago. I look back on it now, years later, and I think, do I regret doing it? No. Would I do it again? Yes. But I also think to myself, well, there might be a set of circumstances where that's not my reaction. It might just depend on the situation, and I could see that there might be a situation where I would say no. I can't imagine it, but I would leave that possibility out there. Because, again, like I said, there's a lot of factors. Many of them are quite significant. And you got to weigh and balance that into your decision. Now, come back to the case study. I'm asking you questions like, do you think what she did is right or wrong? Would you let her off the hook if she had not done it? These are things we need to weigh and to make some decisions about. And think to yourself, as you're going through that process, what would you have done in her situation? Would you have immediately called the police? Again, it's one of those things which I think what she did was admirable. I don't think it was required, but close to it. It's a tricky case. So look, I'm going to leave you there and see what you come up with. There's lots of other case studies and lessons in Module 1 of the Exploring Humanitarian Law section put out by the ICRC. That might be of help to you. If you feel like you're getting stuck, weighed down, go back to that, take a look at it, look at some of the other cases. They have the story of the shopkeeper and others, which are related in terms of what they're trying to convey here. So, take a look at that, sort that out, and look, remember, it's Thursday, it's like they say on your rearview mirror, deadlines are closer than they appear, so don't lose sight of Sunday night the 25th when your response is due. In the meantime, think about all this. Take a look through those materials, apply them to the case study, get something on paper, and I look forward to seeing it. Take care. Bye-bye.